Good morning, Skallywags. Shpoo here. Anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love horror movies. As if the background in most of my videos wasn't pure evidence of that. What you may not be aware is that my favorite horror movie icon is none other than Michael Audrey, yes, this guy's middle name is Audrey, Myers. I even got him right there, and back here, and over here. And I don't know, there's a couple more of them floating around somewhere. But anyway, I absolutely love all of the Halloween films, even the bad ones. I could honestly sit and watch every single one of the Halloween movies on an absolute loop 24 hours a day and be perfectly happy doing so. So whenever I hear about a Halloween script that's online that never got made, I get really excited and I go and read those kind of like a hobby. And let me tell you, there are a lot of unmade Halloween movies. So in case you haven't figured it out yet, we're going to be talking about one such movie over the next couple of weeks on The Best Never Made. So, that being said, before 2018's Halloween came along, there was a lot of debate over what to do with the Halloween franchise going forward. The original franchise had kind of run its course, with many people believing 2002's Halloween Resurrection to be bottom of the barrel, to put it lightly. Skedaddle! Of course, the Rob Zombie franchise kind of fizzled out after the second entry got less than stellar reviews. But, having said that, there was actually a third installment that was in early stages of pre-production at the time of the film that we're going to be talking about today. And yes, spoiler alert, we will be talking about that one pretty soon as well. But that film was ultimately tossed aside as well. So, where do they go with it? What do they do next? There were a number of scripts that were floating around at the time, but the one that came the closest to happening was a 2016 script by Patrick Milton and Marcus Dunstan called Halloween Returns. The film was meant to be kind of a recalibration of the Halloween franchise in a series that had a do-over no less than, 3-4 times? You had the first two movies, then the third one had nothing to do with the first two, then the fourth one ignored part 3, and then that ran for 4, 5, and 6, then 7 ignored part 3 through 6 and went back to part 2, then 2018 ignored all of them and only focused on 1978. It's had a few redos over the years. And this particular movie was no different. It was meant to be a standalone movie that would kind of reintroduce audiences to the concept and the character of Michael Myers. And it would have happened, except for the fact that Dimension Films then lost the rights to Halloween before the film could move forward, thus leaving it, along with many others, to collect dust in the annals of the internet. So today I give you a sneak peek into the what may have been with 2016's Halloween Returns, one of the best Halloween movies never made. The movie opens on Halloween night 1978, just moments after the screen went black on the original Halloween film. Almost the entire opening scene, which is several minutes long, is seen from the point of view of Michael Myers, which is absolutely insane and awesome. We see a girl named Karen who is running and screaming for help. She's limping, she's bleeding profusely from a stab wound to her leg, and Myers is slowly following her down an alleyway when he pauses briefly to look in somebody's window. That person is watching the news, and we kind of get a little bit of what's happening and where we are in the story based on this news report. The report says that there is an APB that has been put out for Michael Myers, who escaped from Smith Grove Sanitarium last night and is now believed to be at large in Haddonfield. He quickly turns his attention back to Karen whenever she screams out for help again, and he begins to follow her, but he is interrupted again, this time by a group of young trick-or-treaters. He stops and kind of watches the group wander past him for a moment, and he begins to move forward again when suddenly he sees an officer step out of the shadows to speak to the kids. Michael kind of hides behind some bushes and continues to watch. Moments later, this squad car comes flying up from off-screen, and the officer inside talks to the officer standing on the curb and says he found 3 more bodies in a house right up the street. Officer on the curb jumps into the squad car and the two of them speed away. Michael steps out of the bushes and begins to walk again, but stops and peers into another window where we see a woman named Beth who's separating some candy out for her son. She also is watching the news, so it kind of continues the broadcast from earlier. This time, the reporter says that there have been no less than 5 violent attacks, and that the most recent victims that have been found was a teenage girl and a man who was believed to be Michael Myers' doctor. And in case you're keeping score, yes, that means that in this version, Laurie Strode and Dr. Loomis are both dead, killed on the night of the original Halloween film. Suddenly, there's a banging at the woman's back door. It's Karen. And she bursts through the door screaming, "He's out there, he killed my friends, you gotta help me." She's obviously hysterical. Beth leads Karen into the front room to call the police. We kind of peek upstairs for just a moment to see that there's a young boy standing in his bedroom, kind of taking his costume off. Meanwhile, back downstairs, Beth, she picks up the phone and dials 911. And outside, we can actually hear police sirens kind of coming from all directions. Michael walks up to the front door, but the door is locked. He punches through the window on the door and kind of shoves on through. Beth is standing right there and immediately just plunges a knife right into her stomach. Karen screams, "It's him! It's him!" And she takes off running upstairs because, well, it's a horror film and that's what you do in a horror film. Michael follows her and a trail of blood up the stairs, stopping only briefly to kind of peek inside the little boy's room that we saw just a moment ago. Michael just sees this kid standing there in a Halloween costume, and while the script does not say it, I'm picturing a clown costume because, well, it's Michael Myers. And he sees this kid in his costume anyway, and he decides to just keep walking and chasing Karen down. He reaches the back bedroom where Karen ran in, and inside, much like the end of the original film, there's a patio door that's open inside this room. So Michael at first walks over to this patio, but stops at the last minute and turns his attention toward the closet. And he kind of just starts stabbing at the closet door, and Karen, of course, she's hiding inside there. She decides she's going to bolt for it, so she tries to run past Michael and runs for the patio door. But just before she gets there, Michael stabs her in the back. She ends up toppling over the side and falling down to the ground, where she's still alive, but just barely. Michael climbs over the side and climbs down to the ground to finish her off, when suddenly squad cars come flying up from practically every direction. Michael is completely surrounded and he's just staring at cops in every direction. And they're all screaming at him to get on the ground, drop the knife. And one of the officers steps up, and it's Deputy Hunt, who actually was in Halloween Part 2. This is actually his home. The young boy we saw in the costume a minute ago, he comes flying out the door and runs up to his dad and hugs his dad. And Deputy Hunt, he's asking him, where's your mother? Where's your other brother? And he goes barreling into the house, just knowing that the worst has happened. We find out that this little boy's name is Noah, and I only bring that up because he's going to come up later in the story. Meanwhile, Michael looks back over at Karen, who's still just laying there barely clinging to life, trying desperately just to kind of claw at the ground to scoot away. And right as he is about to move in to make his final kill, we hear somebody screaming from off camera, "Stop, Michael! They'll kill you!" We then pan over to see Dr. Rogers, who is Michael's psychiatrist, which I thought Dr. Loomis was his psychiatrist, but I guess you need some character to fill that role, and since Donald Pleasance is dead, I guess that's one way to do it, but it's just weird to have this other guy come out of nowhere who also was that position. It's just weird. Anyway, he's described as being a mid-30s clinical psychiatrist, a sincere-looking man in street clothes, who could not look more out of place in Haddonfield. So I'm guessing he looks very California. I don't know. He tells Michael that everyone's dead. You've killed them all. You can stop now. Through the POV, Michael's POV, we see that Dr. Rogers has a very calm face, but he kind of scans around and he notices that his hands are shaking violently. Michael looks back at Karen, then to the knife, then to the cops, then to Dr. Rogers, and finally he drops to his knees. Dr. Rogers rushes up and immediately rips the mask off of Michael Myers' head, but we do not see his face. We only see the back of his head. And there's this crane shot that starts here and comes up over his head bed, and we see all the cops and everybody in the yard, and then it says we pan out until we're looking at all of Haddonfield, and there's just flashing lights and sirens everywhere. And the camera fades out to the opening title sequence. Now that's just the opening scene. And if the rest of the movie is as epic as that opening scene was, then we are not only in for a ride by reading through this, but it's a true shame that this movie never got made. Yes, the rest of the movie is as good as this opening scene was, in my opinion. So how about the title sequence? Does it stand up to being anywhere near as cool as that opening sequence was? Well, yes it does. And I'm gonna give it to you word for word as it's shown in the script. Darkness. A shape starts to form. A flickering orange color begins to overtake the screen and reveals a pumpkin in the middle of the screen, a jack-o'-lantern. 2 candles cast the orange glow on the carved, grinning face. Superimpose main titles. Camera slowly pulls back to reveal more pumpkins, all flickering orange. The pumpkins are surrounded by black. We continue to pull back, the pumpkins getting smaller and smaller, until it is to reveal that the pumpkins are a reflection in the center of a black iris, a human eye. Pull back as the face starts to form. But it's not a normal face. It is of a Halloween mask. It is the Halloween mask. The mask fills the screen. It is a blank, dark, breathing, staring human behind the mask. Superimpose final credit. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm very much a visual thinker. You tell me something or you describe something to me, and my brain immediately puts a picture of whatever it is you're saying in my mind. And that's part of the reason why I love to read these scripts so much, because I can read them and practically watch the movie in my head. And I can picture this opening title sequence, and let me tell you, it makes me think back to like the opening title sequence from Halloween 2. Where we're pulling in and the pumpkin splits open and there's the skull inside and stuff like that. And that is epic, and it's very simple. This is a little more complicated than that, because we're seeing, everything expanding until you see go from one jack-o'-lantern to a bunch of jack-o'-lanterns to an eye to the face of Michael Myers. While this movie never got made, there is absolutely no reason that they couldn't still use this title sequence in any future Halloween film, and I hope to God that they do. Anyway, enough fanboying. From there, we move on to kind of see a bit of a montage of like newspaper clippings and actual like nightly news footage. We see a headline that says Halloween killer leaves 12 dead, and we see a bunch of pictures of all the victims like Annie and Lori and Dr. Loomis and everybody else. We get to hear a number of voiceovers during this time, including one of them being Deputy Hunt. He says that the dead will always be remembered, including my wife. Myers will answer for what happened to her. And we find out that Deputy Hunt has actually been promoted to sheriff in nearby Russellville. We also hear the voice of Karen, and she says basically, he took everything from me. Everything. She's distraught. She's crying in front of a big press conference type of thing. We see another headline that says, death penalty sought for Halloween killer. And we actually see a picture of Michael in chains in a jail cell, which is just amazing. That not only is he in the cell, but they've got him in chains inside the cell. He's got his head down, of course, so we don't see his face. That's one great thing about this particular script, is he doesn't have his mask through a good chunk of it. But they make it a clear point on numerous occasions to point out we will never see his face. Even though he's not wearing the mask, we will not see his face. Period. We get to see a kind of one of those courtroom sketches, and there's actually a sketch of Dr. Rogers in the court, and we hear a voiceover of him saying that he feels that Michael is mentally stable enough to go to trial. We then see another headline that says Halloween killer has been sentenced to death. And we see Michael sitting in court again with his head down so we can't see his face. And finally we get one last headline that reads, 10 years after Haddonfield massacre, appeals exhausted, Halloween killer to be put to death by lethal injection October 30th. Which has got to be the longest headline of any paper I've ever seen in the history of ever. And with that, we finally fade into the actual opening scene of present day. And that's where we're going to leave it off for this episode. Ha ha ha! If you want to know what happens, you're just going to have to come back next Wednesday. And the best way to do that is to subscribe so that you get notifications whenever I post content, which is every Monday through Friday. This show every Wednesday. So come back next Wednesday and it'll be there, or you should just subscribe and do it that way because it's much easier. Until then, guys, follow us across all of our social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we are on Twitter. And like I was saying, do the YouTube things, the commenting, the liking, the sharing, the subscribing, do all of those things because they definitely help out here at the channel and we love to hear from you. So I do my best to communicate with anyone who wants to communicate with me, and yeah, we'll have a thing called conversation that people used to have before texting came along. I'm old. While you're out here on the internet, hop over to a site called www.geekycool.com. We have partnered up with them, and that is your one-stop shop for absolutely all things nerd, whether it's articles, reviews, news, comics, movies, you name it. If it's a nerd thing, you're gonna find it there. There's a little something for everybody, so go check them out. They also have a live broadcast they do every Tuesday night, usually. Every once in a while the dates change, but most of the time it's Tuesday. I'm on there from time to time. I was actually on there this week. But it's very interactive. We love to hear from you guys, so check that out. That's on Facebook and YouTube. Again, that's www.geekycool.com. Go show some love. Tell them Skallywags sent you. And yes, do that. Do the things. So that's going to wrap things up for today. Tune in tomorrow for another exciting episode in a series of enigmatic events, and we will see you back here for the continuation of Halloween Returns next Wednesday. Thanks for watching.